What's up everybody, this is Morteza Kordi, and in this video I am going to talk about the chapter intro, Advanced Control Flow. So in the previous chapter of the course, we've learned how to control the flow of execution using the if expressions and while loops. In this chapter, we are going to learn about another way to control the flow of execution. We are going to learn about for loops. So now let me give you some examples about using loops in real-world programs. For example, you may want to download a random image from the internet. We use the loops in order to iterate over all of the images and then select one of them and download it. So it is very useful to use a loop to do that. Or for example, you want to create a game and you want to throw 10 obstacles at the player. We use a loop in order to get 10 obstacles and throw at the user or at the player in a specific period of time. So you can see that the loop is going to simplify our life as a programmer. We do not have to repeat ourselves. We do not have to write 1,000 lines of code. With just writing one line of code, we can do a lot. Or for example, I want to create a boxing game. And I want my boxer to throw 5 punches when the user taps on a specific button. In that case, I can use a loop in order to allow the boxer to throw 5 punches when a button is tapped. So loops are very common in computer programs. In this chapter, we are going to also learn about the when expressions. By using the when expressions, we can inspect a value and we can do something based on that value. So it is a very powerful feature of the Kotlin programming language. In the next video, we are going to learn about ranges in Kotlin. Hey, what's up everybody, this is Morteza Kordi, and in this video we are going to learn about ranges in Kotlin. So first and foremost, the range data type allows us to represent a sequence of countable integers. So let's see some real-world examples and then it will completely make sense. So let's say val, and it is going to be my closed range. And the type is going to be what? Int range. So this is the type. Assignment operator. So I'm gonna say 0 dot dot. So this is how you create a closed range, okay? 0 dot dot 10. So what does this mean? These 2 dots that you can see here show that this range is closed range and it goes from 0 to 10 inclusive. So this means that we are going to have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So the number 10 is also included. So this means that this range, my closed range, contains these numbers, 0 through 10. So this is about closed range. Let's learn about another range. So here, let me tell you that the ranges are very important in Kotlin because later when we are going to learn about for loops, ranges are used frequently. So it's very important to learn about ranges first. So the second range that I am going to talk about here is the half open range. So now let's create an example here. So here it is, my half open range. It is again of type int range. And here, instead of 2 dots, we've got until. So 0 until 10. This means that this range goes from 0 up to, but not including number 10. So here are the numbers that this range includes. 0, 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, but not including number 10. Okay? So this is called half open range. And here let me tell you that these ranges are always increasing. This means that the second number, the second value after the dots or until must always be greater than or equal to the first number. So now let's go ahead and output these ranges to the console and see the results. First we've got the my closed range and also we've got the my half open range. Let's run the app. So here we've got 0 through 10, and here we've got 0 through 9. So hopefully that makes sense. So now let's learn about the final type of range, which is called decreasing range. So let's say val my decreasing range, and it is going to be of type int progression. So it is not going to be of type int range, it is actually of type int progression, assignment operator, and here I can say 10 down to 0. So this is a decreasing range, okay? So this means that this range goes from number 10 to number 0 inclusive. So here we've got numbers 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 7, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and 0. It is inclusive. So let's go ahead and run the app and see the results. My decreasing range. So here it is the result, 10 down to 0, step 1. So for now, just ignore this step 1 here. Here it is the result that we've got from this decreasing range. So in the next tutorial, we are going to learn about for loops in Kotlin. I look forward to seeing you next. Hi there, in this video, we are going to learn about for loop in Kotlin. First and foremost, for loop is the most common loop that we'll use in our programs. In order to create a for loop in Kotlin, we use the for keyword, and then inside the parenthesis, first we need to have the constant followed by the keyword in, and then the range. And then we need to open and close our for loop by using these curly braces. An opening curly brace followed by a closing curly brace. Now you might notice that for loop also introduces a new scope. And inside our for loop, we have our code, the code that we want to be repeated a bunch of times. So let me comment out this example here, and let's create a real world example. So first of all, let's create a variable and name it as multiply result. Assignment operator. And initially, let's assign the value number 1 to this variable. So let's say 4. And first of all, we need to have the constant. I'll talk more about this constant later. For now, just put I as the constant. And then we need to put the keyword in. Next, we need to have the range. So I want the range to be, for example, 1 through 5. So this is going to be my range. And then open and close your for loop by using these curly braces. So inside this for loop, I am going to say multiply result, multiplication operator, assignment operator 2. So I want to get the current value of the multiply result and multiply that value by 2 and assign it back to this multiply result variable. So then after this for loop is executed, I'm going to go ahead and output the value of the multiply result to the console. Okay, so let's run the app and see what happens. So in the console, we've got number 32 as the value of this multiply result. So what's going on here? So first of all, in this code, this for loop iterates through this range 1 through 5. And at the first iteration, this I, this constant, will equal to the first value of this range, which is going to be number 1. Okay? So for the first time that this for loop is going to be executed, this I value is going to be equal to the first value or number of this range, which is going to be number 1. So this I is now 1. And then it's going to go inside this for loop. So we've got multiply result. The current value of this multiply result is 1, right? So here let me tell you that another way to write this code is to say multiply result, assignment operator, multiply result, multiplied by 2, okay? So this is another way. I'm going to comment it out. So this way it is actually simpler for beginners to understand, but here this way is more professional. So now you can see that the current value of the multiply result is 1. So number 1 multiplied by 2 is going to be 2. The result is going to be assigned back to this multiply result. and then it's going to go back to this code inside the parenthesis of this for loop. So now this I, this constant, will equal the second element in the range. So the second element in this range is going to be number 2, right? So now the I is number 2, and now it's going to go inside this for loop. Okay, so now the current value of this multiply result is 2. So number 2 multiplied by 2 is 4. So number 4 is going to be assigned back to this multiply result. Okay, now it's going to go back to the parenthesis of this for loop. So now the I will equal the third element in this range. So the third element is number 3, right? So it's going to go inside this for loop again. Now the current value of this multiply result is 4. So 4 multiplied by 2 is 8. Okay, so 8 is going to be assigned back to this multiply result variable. And again, it's going to go to the parenthesis of this for loop. So now the I is going to be equal to the next element in this range, which is going to be number 4. And then it's going to go inside the curly braces of this for loop. Now the current value of this multiply result is 8. So 8 multiplied by 2 is 16. So 16 is going to be assigned back to this multiply result. Now the I is going to be equal to the next element in this range, which is going to be number 5. So it's going to go inside this for loop, and here you can see that the multiply result, the current value of this multiply result is 16. So 16 multiplied by 2 is going to be 32. So 32 is going to be assigned back to this multiply result, and it's going to go back to the parenthesis of this for loop. So here the I cannot be equal to the next element in this range because the range is finished. It is from 1 to 5, and it is finished now. So this condition inside the parenthesis is now false. It is not going to be executed anymore. So it's going to skip this for loop, and it's going to go to this line of code in line number 18, and it's going to execute this code. So it's going to print out multiply result to the console, which is number 32, as you can see here. So this for loop that you can see here is executed 5 times. So that's why we use this range here in order to specify that how many times we want this for loop to be executed. And in order to make this for loop a little bit more interesting, here I want to tell you that you know that this for loop introduces a new scope, right? So this means that this I here, this constant, can only be accessed inside this for loop. We cannot use this I outside of this for loop. So inside this for loop, we can say multiply result multiplied by 2, okay, plus I. So we can also add the value of the I after this multiplication operation. So this way it's more interesting. Now let's go ahead and run the app and see the result. So here it is, the result outputted to the console. 2520. So here I'm using a closed range, right? So what happens if I used a half open range? So let me comment out these lines of code here, and instead let's use a half open range. So here I can say 4, and we've got the constant in, the range is going to be 1 until 5. So here inside the for loop, I'm gonna say multiply result, assignment operator, multiply result, multiplied by 2 plus 1. So after this for loop, I'm gonna go ahead and output this value to the console. So it is going to be multiply result. So if I run the app, let's see what happens. In the console, the value of 31 is outputted here. So what's going on here? Again, you know that this range is not inclusive. So this range starts from number 1 up to, but not including number 5. So what does this mean? This means that this for loop is going to be executed 4 times instead of 5 times. So the first time that this for loop is going to be executed, the value of the I is equal to the first element in this range, which is number 1. So it's going to go inside the curly braces of this for loop. So we have multiply result. The current value of this multiply result is 1. Number 1 multiplied by 2 is 2, plus 1 is 3. So 3 is going to be assigned to this multiply result. Okay, now it's going to go back to the parenthesis of this for loop. Now the current value of this I is equal to the second element in this range, which is going to be number 2. So it's gonna go inside the curly braces of this for loop. So the current value of this multiply result is number 3, right? So 3 multiplied by 2 is 6. 6 plus 1 is 7. So 7 is going to be assigned back to this multiply result. Now it's gonna go back again to this for loop. So now the value of this I is going to be equal the third element in this range, which is going to be number 3. Now it's gonna go inside the curly braces of this for loop. And now the current value of this multiply result is 7. So 7 multiplied by 2 is 14. 14 plus 1 is 15. So 15 is going to be assigned to this multiply result. Now the flow of the program is going to go inside the parenthesis of this for loop. Now this I is going to be equal the fourth element in this range, which is going to be number 4. So it's going to go inside the curly braces of this for loop. Now the current value of this multiply result is 15, right? So 15 multiplied by 2 is 30. And 30 plus 1 is 31. And 31 is going to be assigned back to this multiply result. And again, it's going to go inside the parenthesis of this for loop. Now it's going to take a look at the condition that we have inside this for loop. So I told you that in this range, number 5 is not included. So I cannot be equal the number 5, right? So this for loop is going to be ended here, and it's going to go after the curly braces of this for loop, and it's going to execute this println statement. So that's why in the console you can see number 31 is outputted here. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so now let's comment out these lines of code here because we don't need them anymore. So sometimes you might want to execute a code a certain number of times, or you might want to repeat something a certain number of times. In those cases, you don't need the constant, right? So for that, we have something called repeat. So we just write the repeat keyword, and then inside the parenthesis of this repeat, I'm gonna put the number of times that I want to execute a code. So for example, I want to output the value hi world to the console 5 times. And then we just need to open and close this repeat by using these curly braces. And inside the curly braces, I'm gonna say println hi world. Okay. So let's go ahead and run the app. So in the console, the value hi world is outputted here 5 times. So if you want to, you can also use a counter here and then increase the number of counter and see how many times this hi world is outputted to the console. For example, you can use the string template in order to also see the value of the counter. Hopefully that makes sense. So finally, it's also possible to only perform certain iterations in the range. So let me comment out these lines of code here. So now, for example, I have a for loop and I want to do some iterations on the odd numbers or even numbers in my range. So first we need to have the I, followed by the in keyword, and then we need to have the range. So here I can say 1 through 10. Next, I'm gonna say step 2, right? And then I'm gonna open and close this for loop by using these curly braces. So let's create a variable before this for loop, and this variable is going to be my number. Assignment operator 10. So initially this variable holds the value 10. Okay. Inside this for loop, first I'm gonna say my number, assignment operator, my number multiplied by 2. Okay, so let's see what's going on here. So after this for loop, let's go ahead and output the value of this my number to the console. First, let's see the result, and then I'm gonna explain to you what's going on here exactly. So the value 320 is outputted to the console. Okay, let's go to our code. First of all, we have this my number, which is initially number 10. Then inside the parenthesis of this for loop, we have something new. What is this step 2? So let me tell you what is it exactly. So this for loop starts with I, which is going to be the constant, and you already know about it. So for the first time that this for loop is going to be executed, this I is going to be equal the first element in this range, which is number 1. Okay, so what is this step 2? So the first time that this for loop is going to be executed, this I is going to be equal the first element in this range, which is going to be number 1. Okay, so it's gonna go inside the curly braces of this for loop. For now, just ignore this step 2 here. it's gonna go inside the curly braces of this for loop. So now we've got the my number. Okay, so my number is 10, right? Multiplied by 2, the result is 20. The 20 is going to be assigned to this my number, which is now 20. Now it's gonna go back into the parenthesis of this for loop. So now we've got this step 2. The step 2 means go 2 steps forward in this range. What does this mean? For example, if we have number 2, 2 steps forward is going to be what? Number 3, which is an odd number. This means that now I is equal the number 3. And it's gonna go inside the curly braces of this for loop, and the current value of this my number is 20. So 20 multiplied by 2 is 40. So 40 is going to be assigned to this my number, okay? And now it's gonna go inside the parenthesis of this for loop. And now we've got the step 2 again. So the step 2 means, again, go 2 steps forward. So 2 steps forward from the number 3 is number 5. This means that now I is equal the number 5. So hopefully now you understand what is the dynamic here. So in order to simplify the task of controlling the flow of the program, I want you to use a breakpoint. So on the left sidebar here, in line number 35, our for loop starts, right? So I'm gonna create a breakpoint. So just click on this gray area beside number 35. You can see that I have created this breakpoint, this little red circle, just beside this for loop. And now at the top right here, you can see that we have this debug icon, okay? I'm gonna click on it. So let's wait a little bit here until this process is finished. Okay, now the debugger area is opened. So at the bottom, you can see that the debugger area here is opened. And here we've got the variables area. So this is the area that I want you to look at here. This is very important. So the debugger area is going to allow us to control the flow of the program step by step. So currently it is showing us this multiply result variable. So let me go back to our code, and I'm gonna comment out this code because I don't want to see this variable here. Let's go ahead and click on the debug again, stop and run. And now inside this debugging area, inside the variable section, we've got this my number, which is initially number 10. So now here we have this icon. If I hover over it, it is named as step over, or F8 if you want to use a shortcut. Let's click on it. So now it's gonna go inside this for loop and it's gonna execute this line of code. Currently inside this variable section, you can see that the value of the I is number 1, which is exactly what I told you about. The I is going to be equal the first element in the range, which is number 1. That's okay. Let's click on this step over again. Now this line of code is executed and the value of this my number is 20. And now it's gonna go back to the parenthesis of this for loop. So let's see what is going to happen. I told you that we have step 2. So this means that it's gonna start from the first element in this range and it's gonna go 2 steps forward. So that's why it is step 2. So if you want to go 3 steps forward, you need to say step 3. If you want to go 1 step forward, you need to say step 1. Hopefully that makes sense. So 2 step forward is going to be number 3, right? 1 plus 2 actually. So now the I is equal to number 3. Let's go ahead and click on this step over again. Now the value of this I is 3 and now it is about to execute this line of code. So the current value of this my number is 20, right? Let's see what happens if this code is executed. Step over. Now the current value of this my number is 40 and now currently the value of this I is 3. So we've got the step 2 again. So step 2 means that it's gonna start now from the number 3. So 3 plus 2 is going to be 5. Now the current value of this I is going to be 5. If I click on this step over, inside this variables area, you can see that I is now 5, okay? So now it is about to execute this line of code. Currently the value of the my number is 40. So if I execute this code, now the current value of the my number is 80, as you can see inside this variables section. So now we've got the step 2 again. So again, it's gonna start from the number 5. Step 2 means number 7. So I is now equal to number 7. If I execute this code inside this variable section, we've got the number 7. Okay, let's execute this code again. Now the value of the my number is 160. So now we've got number 7, 2 step forward is going to be what? 9. So notice the dynamic here. These numbers are all odd numbers, right? Let's execute this code. Let's click on the step over. Now the value of the I is 9, and now it is going to execute this line of code. So let's click on step over again. Now we've got number 320 as the value of this my number. So we've got number 9, right? Notice the range here, it is from 1 through 10. So if I say number 9, 2 step forward, it is going to be 11. So number 11 is not in this range. So this means that now if I click on step over, this for loop is ended. And now it is about to execute this println statement. And you can see that the value of the my number is 320. And if I click on this step over again, it is going to output 320 to the console. So at the bottom, if I click on this run here, the value 320 is outputted to the console. So this is the dynamic of the program that I want you to understand. And by the way, if you want to delete a breakpoint, you just need to click on this little circle again, and now it is gone. Hopefully that makes sense. So as the final point of this tutorial, we can also count down in a for loop using the down to. So let's go ahead and comment out these lines of code here. So here I want to, for example, output the even numbers from number 100 to 0. So I'm going to say for. So I've got the I in. So here it is going to be the range, number 100 down to 0. And what is going to be the step? It is going to be step 2. So hopefully you have guessed it right. Okay. So now I'm going to say println I inside the for loop. So let's go ahead and run the app and see the result. So let's see. We've got number 100, 98, 96, all the way to the 0. So what's going on here? Again, if you want to understand what's going on here exactly, you can use a breakpoint in the line where you have created your for loop, and then click on this debugging icon. So here we've got the variable section. So it is actually showing us the my number. So we don't need to see this my number value. Let me comment out this line of code. And let's click on debug again, stop and rerun. So here inside this variable section, you can see that we've got these args, which is not important. Don't worry about this one. Now let's click on step over in order to start executing this for loop. Now here we've got the value of the I, which is number 100, right? Okay, so it's going to output the value of 100 to the console. Let's click on step over again, and now it's going to go back to this for loop. So here we've got step 2, right? I told you that step 2 means 2 step forward. But now, because we've got the down to, step 2 means 2 step backward. So what does this mean? This means that the value of the I is 100, right? So 2 step backward is number 98. So I just need to create a comment, number 98. Okay. So let's click on this step over again. And here the value of the I is 98. So let's click on this step over in order to print out 98 to the console. Okay. Now it's going to go back to this for loop. So here again, we've got step 2. So 2 step backward is going to be what? 96. So I'm going to just type it here. And if I execute this code, you can see that I is now 96. So hopefully that makes sense. So in the next tutorial, we are going to learn about label statements in Kotlin. I look forward to seeing you next. Hey, what's up everybody? This is Morteza Kordi, and in this video we are going to learn about labeled statements in Kotlin. So sometimes in programming we want to skip a loop iteration for a specific case without breaking out of the loop entirely. For that we have something called continue. So let's create a for loop and then it will completely make sense. So for example, I want to output the odd numbers to the console, the odd numbers from 0 to 10. So first we need to have the I in 0 dot dot 10. So in order to do that, I'm going to say println, and then I'm going to output the value I. But this statement is going to output all the numbers from 0 to 10 to the console. But that is not what I want. So let's run the app and let me show you the result. So here it is, the console 0 through 10. But now I told you I want to output the odd numbers from 0 to 10. How can I do that? First of all, we need to create an if statement. We need to say if I modulo, so you know about the modulo, right? The modulo operator, 2 is equal to 0. So if this operation is true, this means that our number is an odd number. So hopefully you know about the mathematics a little bit, and you know that when we have a number and we divide it by 2 and the remainder value is 0, this means that number is actually even. So if that is the case, I don't want to output that value to the console. In that case, I'm going to say continue. So when I say continue, this means that I want to skip a loop iteration for this specific case where I modulo 2 is equal to 0, or in other words, where I is actually an even number. In that case, I want to skip this loop iteration and I want to go back to the condition inside the parenthesis of this for loop, and I want to check this for loop again. So let's run the app and let's see the result. So let me show you the console area, and here you can see that the odd numbers are outputted to the console. If you want to control the flow of the program, you can use a breakpoint here, and let's click on the debugging icon and see how this for loop is executed. Okay, so let's click on this step over. Now the value of the I is 0. Okay, it's gonna take a look at this if statement, and it's gonna say 0 modulo 2 is 0. So that is an odd number. So if I click on step over, you can see that it's gonna go inside the curly braces of this if statement, and it's gonna execute this continue statement. Notice what happens if I click on step over in order to execute this continue statement. You can see that it went back to the parenthesis of this for loop. It didn't execute this println I, right? It actually skipped this loop iteration for this specific case. Now it's gonna go ahead and go inside the parenthesis of this for loop, so you know that the value of the I now is the next element in this range, which is number 1. So if I click on this step over, the value of the I is 1. So it's gonna take a look at this if statement. Now this condition evaluates to false. Why? Because number 1 modulo 2 is not 0. So this one evaluates to false, and it's not going to execute this if statement, and instead it's going to go ahead and output the value of the I to the console. So if I click on step over, now we can see that if I click on this run, it should actually output the value number 1 to the console. So let's click on this debug area and again step over, and you can see all the cases when this process happens. So let's click on stop this process and let me delete this breakpoint. Hopefully that makes sense. So here let me tell you that you have already learned about the break statement. So you can also use the break statement in a for loop as well as a while loop. You can also use a continue statement in a for loop as well as a while loop. So here, for example, inside the braces of this if statement, I can instead use a break statement, right? Here I just wanted to let you know that these statements are used in loops. Okay, so now let's go ahead and comment out this for loop, because now I want to talk about the labeled statements. So now imagine that we have a table with 3 rows and 2 columns. We can have that in programming using the for loops. That's another great advantage of using the for loops. So I can say for, and here I'm gonna say that we have the row in 0 until 3. Okay, we have 3 rows, and inside this for loop I am going to have another loop. This is going to be a nested for loop. So I'm gonna say for column in 0. So we are going to have 3 rows and 2 columns, 0 until 2. and then open and close this for loop using these curly braces. So inside this first for loop, I'm going to print out the value of the row to the console. So I'm going to say println row, and inside this inner for loop, I'm going to print out the value of the column to the console. So I'm going to say println column. Okay, so now let's go ahead and run this app and see what happens. So when this for loop is executed, the value of the row is outputted here, which is 0. And then it's going to go ahead and immediately execute this for loop. And it's going to output the value of the column to the console, which is actually 0. And then it's going to go ahead and continue executing this inner for loop. So for the first time that this inner for loop is executed, the value of the column is 0. And for the second time that this for loop is executed, the value of the column is 1. So remember, we have 3 rows and 2 columns. So when the columns of this inner for loop is done, it's going to go back to the outer loop and it's going to take a look at the row. So now the value of the row is 1. So after the value of the row is outputted to the console, it's going to go ahead and execute this inner for loop for the row number 1. So we have the column 0 again and column number 1. And then it's going to go back to the outer loop. So now the value of the row is 2. And then it's going to execute this inner for loop. The value of the column is 0. And then we have the value number 1 as the column. Hopefully that makes sense. So now let's go ahead and use a breakpoint and let's see how these loops are executed. Just click on this debugging icon. Okay, so now let's go ahead and click on this step over. So now the value of the row is 0. And then it's going to output the value row to the console. So now row is 0 and it is outputted to the console. And now it's time for the inner loop to be executed. So click on this step over. Now the value of the column is 0 and it's going to output the value of the column to the console. And now it went back to the inner loop again and it's going to output the value of the column again, which is going to be number 1. So if I click on the step over, the value of the column is 1 and it's going to output the value of the column to the console. Now it went back to the inner for loop again. So now this condition is going to be failed because we only have 2 columns. So if I click on step over, it's going to go back to the outer loop here. Now the value of the row is 1. So it's going to output the value row number 1 to the console. And then we have the inner loop. So again, 0, 1 for the column, and it's going to go back to the outer loop. Now the value of the row is 2. Output the value 2 to the console, and it's time for the inner loop to be executed, 0, 1. Done. And if I click on a step over again, because we only have 3 rows, the for loop is done. So here let me tell you that we can also give these for loops a name. That's the purpose of this tutorial. We have labeled statements in Kotlin. So in order to give our for loops a name, before this for loop, I'm going to say loop for rows. Okay? And then put the @ here. So now this outer loop has a name called loop for rows. And now let's give this inner loop a name. I can say loop for columns. And you need to put the @ here. So now this inner loop has also a name. Now you might ask that, okay, what is the use of these names? Why we should give loops a name? So now I'm going to give you the answer. You can use these names in order to continue or break out of a loop. For example, here inside this inner loop, I can say if. It's just an example. I'm going to say if the value of the column is actually equal to 0, then go ahead and break out of the outer loop or inner loop. So that's why we give our loops a name. So I can say break out sign, loop for rows or loop for columns. I want to break out of the loop for rows, the outer loop. Now let's go ahead and just click on this debugging icon because I want to show you the flow of the program. So now I'm going to click on this step over. Let's see what happens. So it's going to output this value row to the console. Okay, let's click on this step over again. Now it's going to go and execute this loop for columns. Okay, step over. And now it's going to execute this if statement. So you know that the current value of the column is 0. So this condition evaluates to true and it's going to execute this break statement that we have inside the curly braces of this if statement. So if I click on this step over, Now it's gonna execute this break statement. It's gonna break out of the loop for rows. So if I click on step over, now the loop is ended. So here, if I run the app, we should see the result here in the console. We only have number 0 outputted to the console. Hopefully that makes sense. So instead, you can also break out of the inner loop or whatever you want. But I just want you to get the idea, the main idea of labeled statements in Kotlin. In the next tutorial, we are going to learn about when expressions in Kotlin. I look forward to seeing you next. Hey, what's up everybody? This is Morteza Kordi, and in this video, we are going to learn about when expressions in Kotlin. So a when expression executes a code depending on the value of a variable or constant that we create inside our program. So let's see some real-world examples. For example, I want to create a dating application that only allows users who are 20 years old to sign up. So in that case, first we need to have a variable that is going to hold the value of the age. I'm going to say age, and I'm going to say, for example, 20. Okay, and now I'm going to create a when expression. The reason that I am saying that this is actually an expression is that it is going to return a value. So when. And then inside the parentheses, we need to pass the variable or constant. Okay, open and close this when expression by using these curly braces. As you can see, we have a new scope. Inside the curly braces, I'm going to say if the age is 20, then go ahead and execute this code. Println, you are qualified to sign up. So let's also have an else statement here for other cases, for the cases that the age is not actually 20. In those cases, I'm going to say else, println, you are not qualified to sign up. So now let's go ahead and run the app. So in the console, it says you are qualified to sign up. So what happens if I change the value of the age to, for example, 10? And now if I run the app, let's see what happens. Now it says you are not qualified to sign up. Notice that this when expression only allows the users who are 20 years old to sign up to our dating application, for example. So if I change the age to 30, now it is also showing us that you are not qualified to sign up. So hopefully that makes sense. So let's create another variable, and I'm going to specify it as the RAM of my computer, assignment operator, and I'm going to assign the value 16 to this variable. So here I can say when RAM, open and close this when expression with these braces, and then I can say if the value of the RAM is 16, then go ahead and println RAM is 16. Here, I don't want to specify an else statement. I just want to print the value RAM is 16 to the console if the value of this RAM variable is 16. So if the value of the RAM variable is not 16, I don't want anything to happen. So let's go ahead and run the app. Now this value is outputted to the console. RAM is 16. So if I change the value of the RAM to, for example, 20, and if I run the app, you can see that nothing is going to happen. Nothing is outputted to the console. So let's also create another variable. This time I want to show you that we can also use the when expression with other data types. So let's create a variable of type string. I'm going to name it as my computer, assignment operator, and I'm going to assign the value MacBook to this variable. So let's say when. And inside the parentheses, I'm going to say my computer. So here, instead of one value, I'm going to specify two values. So here I can say double quotes, MacBook, comma, PC. Okay, if these two cases are true, then go ahead and output these values to the console. My computer is either MacBook or PC. Okay. So now let's go ahead and run the app. So if you want to, you can also indicate multiple values for the variable that you specify inside a when expression. So now in the console it says my computer is either MacBook or PC. So for example, if I change the value of this MacBook to PC, now it is also going to execute this case because the PC is also mentioned here. So now it says my computer is either MacBook or PC. And if I change it to something else, for example, Chromebook, and if I run the app, now nothing is going to happen. Nothing is going to be outputted to the console. So let's add an else statement to our when expression. I can say else, and I can point to a code that I want to execute. I can say my computer is something else. So let's run the app. Now it is going to execute this else statement. Okay, my computer is something else. Hopefully that makes sense. In the next video, we are going to learn about returning values in Kotlin. I look forward to seeing you next. Hey, what's up everybody? This is Morteza Kordi, and in this video, we are going to learn about returning values in Kotlin. First and foremost, you should know that we return a value from an expression. So for example, a when expression can actually return a value, and we can get that value and do something with it. So here, let's create a variable, and let's say that the name of this variable is grade, assignment operator. And initially, let's assign the value 20 to this variable. And then let's also create another variable, and let's say that the name of this variable is description. Assignment operator. So here I'm gonna create a when expression. So let's say when parentheses. So I'm gonna pass the grade to my when expression. So I'm gonna open and close this when by using these curly braces. So if the value of the grade is, for example, 10, I'm gonna return the value bad grade. The compiler is going to infer the data type of my variable to be string based on the value that this when expression is going to return. Okay, so now it is showing us an error on this when. So if I hover over it, it says when expression must be exhaustive. Add necessary else branch. So this means if you want to use your when expression in order to return a value, you must add an else statement so that you can do something with other cases that are not included inside the braces of this when expression. Okay, so it is necessary to use an else statement if you want to return a value from your when expression. Okay, so here, because we want to return a value from our when expression and assign that value to our description variable, we must add an else statement. So let's first put other cases here, and then at the end, we add the else. So let's say if the value of the grade is actually 20, in that case, I'm gonna say, for example, not bad. So let's add another case. So if the value of the grade is 30, in that case, I'm gonna say good. Okay, now we need to add the else. And let's say if the else statement is going to be executed, then go ahead and return the value unknown. Okay, so now let's go ahead and output the value of the description to the console. So I'm gonna say println description. And here notice that if you click on this description and hold down the Shift, Control, and P, you should see that the data type is string. Why? Because the compiler has inferred the data type of this description based on the returned value of this when expression. So here, as I'm returning these string values from these numbers, now the compiler assumes that the data type of this description is actually a string, and that is correct. So let's go ahead and run the app. So in the console, the value not bad is outputted here. So the grade is 20, and here the value not bad is returned from this case, and it is assigned to this description variable, and here we are outputting this value to the console. And the final point that I want to talk about here is that we can also include an entire block of code in the branch, and the last value in the block is returned from the branch. So let me show you how it is done. For example, this case, number 20, not bad, right? I can say open and close these curly braces, and then let's just cut this not bad and use it inside the curly braces here. Just paste it here. And I told you that the last value in the branch is returned, right? So here I can also put a println statement. So here I can say the grade is 20, right? And then return the value not bad from this when expression. So let's go ahead and run the app. So first it is going to output this value, the grade is 20, and then it is going to return the value not bad from this when expression and assign it to this description variable, and then here we are outputting it to the console. So we can do the same for this else. I can open and close curly braces. I can just cut this unknown value and paste it inside the curly braces, and then because I know the last value in the branch is returned from this when expression, I'm gonna say println unknown. So let's go ahead and run the app. So now let's change the grade to, for example, 100. Now the else block is going to be executed. So let's run the app. First it is going to output the unknown, and then it is going to output the returned unknown. Hopefully that makes sense. In the next tutorial, we are going to learn about advanced when expressions in Kotlin. I look forward to seeing you next. Hey, what's up everybody? This is Morteza Kurdi, and in this video, we are going to learn about advanced when expressions in Kotlin. Okay, so now let's take a look at this example that we have here. First of all, we have the grade, and initially it is 50. Then we have the variable description, and it is of type string, and it doesn't have any value initially. So then I am going to initialize this description assignment operator. Next, we have a when expression. So this when expression is going to work on this grade. If the grade is 1 through 10, then we've got bad grade. If it is 11 through 20, not bad. 21 through 30, good. 31 through 40, very good. And 41 through 50, great. And we also have an else, invalid grade, because we are going to return a value from this when expression. This else is necessary. So here you cannot see that this code is not succinct. It is not what we expect from a professional programmer. Right? How can we solve this problem? I don't like writing code like this. So in order to solve this problem, remember the ranges in Kotlin? We can use them here. For example, instead of saying 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, let's say 1 dot dot 10. You can see that it is more succinct than writing the code like this one, right? Like this, for example, 11 through 20. So here it is showing us an error. So in order to solve this problem, we need to use in and then use the range. Okay, so before your range, you must put the in keyword. Hopefully that makes sense. So let's also use a range for these numbers, 11 through 20. So let's delete these numbers and instead let's say in 11 dot dot 20. And let's also use range for these other numbers. Okay, now this is what I expect from a professional programmer. this is more succinct, this is easier to read, and it conveys my intention better. So now let's go ahead and output the value of the description to the console. So let's say println description. Let's run the program. And now in the console it says great. Why? Because the value of this great variable is 50. So 50 is in this range, 41 through 50, and the value great is assigned to this description, and here we are outputting this value to the console. So here let me tell you that we can also match a branch to a condition based on a property of the value without any argument being passed to the when expression. So now let's see a real world example and then it will completely make sense. So let's say that we have a variable and its name is score, assignment operator 20. So now I want to know whether this score is actually even or odd. In that case, we can have when and then open and close this when by using these braces. Here notice that we do not need to supply this when expression with an argument. So inside this block, I'm gonna say score modulo 2 is equal to 0. So if this condition is true, this means that our score is actually even. If it is not true, then this means that our score is actually an odd number. So let's point to this code that I want to execute, and I'm gonna say println, and inside the parentheses, just put 2 double quotes, and let's say this number or this score is even. Okay. And let's have an else statement. So let's say else. So if this condition is not true, then the number is actually an odd number. So I'm gonna say println, the score is odd. So let's run the app and see what happens. So in the console it says this score is even. So notice that I did not supply this when expression with any arguments. I have a condition. If it is true, then it's gonna execute this code. Println, this score is even. And if it is not true, then this score is actually odd. So now let's change the value of the score to 21. Now if I run the app, it should say the score is odd, as you can see here. And if you want to make it even more interesting, I can have multiple conditions. So I can use the logical operator and I can say the score is equal to 20. So if both of these conditions are true, then it's gonna execute this code. Println, this score is even and it is 20. Right? So let's go ahead and change the value of the score to 20. So now let's run the app. Now we can see that it says this score is even and it is 20. So now if I change this score to another even number, for example 18, let's run the app. So now it should not execute this code. Why? Because here you can see that we have 2 conditions and here we are using the AND operator. So both of these conditions must be true so that the value of the whole expression is actually true. And then it can go ahead and print this value to the console. So now it says the score is odd. Why? Because we have an else. So the else is going to be executed for other cases. Okay? So in order to solve this problem, instead of saying the score is odd, for example, I can say this is unknown. Right? Because I want to check only for this condition, if the score is actually an even number and the score is 20. So we can have logical operators and or inside our when expression. You can see that how it can get so much complicated. A when expression is also more succinct than the if expression that you've learned in the previous tutorials. Okay? So here I forgot to put a double quote here. So now there is no error. Hopefully that makes sense. In the next tutorial, we are going to learn about the key points of this chapter. I look forward to seeing you next. Hey, what's up everybody? This is Morteza Kurdi and in this video we are going to learn about the key points of this chapter. So first of all, we use ranges in order to create a sequence of numbers. The closed ranges include both the start and end values that we specify in our program. A half-open range includes the start value up to but not including the end value. We use for loops in order to iterate over a range of numbers or values. We use the continue statement in order to prevent the current iteration of a loop and start the next iteration. We use the labeled statements in order to give a name to our loops so we can break or continue on an outer or inner loop. But in most of the cases, we actually want to break or continue on an outer loop. Just keep that in mind. We use when expressions in order to execute a code based on the value of a variable or constant that we have inside our program. In advanced when expressions, we use pattern matching in order to compare values using specific rules. In the next video, we are going to learn about the exercises of this chapter. Hey, what's up everybody? This is Morteza Kordi, and in this video we are going to learn about the exercises of this chapter. So first of all, create 5 closed ranges, create 5 half-open ranges, create 10 for loops, create 5 repeat for loops, use labeled statements in order to give names to your outer and inner loops and break or continue from your outer loops. Create 10 when expressions. Return value from 5 new when expressions. And make sure to output those values to the console. Create 10 advanced when expressions using ranges and matching a branch to a condition. Make sure to brainstorm and implement all of these exercises.